Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here, and it's a pleasure to be here. Tonight, I'm going to speak about sharks and my work with them. I have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to share that with you. And it's called Shark World. My name is Cristina Zenato, and I've been working and diving with sharks in the Bahamas, specifically on Grand Bahama Island, for the last 26 years. I've learned about sharks working with my mentor, Ben Rose, who unfortunately passed away last year. But I also traveled to different destinations to meet other people that were working with sharks in different parts of the world, and to encounter and understand also different species of sharks and their behaviors. In the Bahamas, on Grand Bahama Island, I work with Caribbean reef sharks. And part of my job includes also feeding them. I consider feeding the sharks as a positive reinforcement, the same way we use it for other animals when we train them. I handle them in the wild, and I promote what is known as a shark tourism. For me, it is very unfortunate that even in the most known shark environments, people talk about sharks as just one species, as just one generalized behavior, when in fact we have about 500 different species of sharks. It is rather hard to identify them as one size fits all. Just consider the difference between the biggest shark in the world, the whale shark, and the smaller shark in the world, the lantern shark, and all the sharks that fit in between these two sizes. Sharks have been present in our culture for thousands of years. I would say people have known about sharks from the first time we put a canoe in the water and we set off to explore our coastlines and actually to go provision from the ocean through fishing. Aristotle described sharks in his writing as early as 331 BC. And sharks are even present in the mosaics of Pompeii. If you look up to the right of the octopus eating the lobster, that is actually a Mediterranean shark. They were worshipped as gods and good fortune in many Pacific islands and Hawaii. In Fiji, they're believed to help fishermen from drowning, and they're actually given the name River of Light. They're actually believed that to pilot fishermen to go and find bountiful fishing grounds by following the bioluminescence trail that they created through the water. Unfortunately, in our world, and especially in the modern Western world, the connotation of the word shark has turned into a negative one. I would say a terrible one. I actually have been introduced to children by their parents as the shark lady. This is the shark lady. She works with sharks, and if you don't behave, she will feed you to them. And it's just like the worst presentation you can do about someone working with sharks and sharks in general. Simply put, I think this picture speaks for it all. I love sharks. I've loved sharks since the day I learned about them. My dad inspired my love for the ocean through his stories and his adventures, and through these black and white pictures of the time that is spent under the waves. I used to always to go in the water with him, hoping to see a shark. And he always tell me that sharks don't like humans. And it's actually very unlikely that I would see a shark. So I actually had to wait a very long time before I was able to see a shark in the water. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family that loves the sea. It always brought me to it and never feared the creatures that live in it. It is a family that taught me healthy respect and understanding on how to approach and be in the sea with each of the creatures. And that always told me that there are no monsters in the ocean, only the ones we make up in our heads. I moved to the Bahamas and stayed for scuba diving. It was only a couple of years ago, as you can tell from the picture. But the main reasons has always been sharks. I had a childhood dream to be an underwater scuba ranger. I wanted to be out in the ocean and defend the reef from all the divers. And I wanted to have sharks for friends. To this day, I am not leaving this place because of these sharks, what I call my sharks. And a little bit also, well, the caves. But I reserve those for a different story. Today, it's all about the shark world. I find sharks vulnerable. If somebody asks me, how would you describe sharks? My word is vulnerable, extremely vulnerable. And I try to show this to others through images and through my action. I see sharks that are injured, sick, damaged, hurt, both by nature, but also by human activity. I actually know my sharks by name. I recognize them by personal features. Each and every one of them looks as every person that I meet somewhere. They're totally different into my eyes. And not only physically, they actually have personalities, they have stories, they suffer, they fear, they feel. And that's what I see and witness when I'm in the water with them. Some of these sharks, the one that I work with, have been on the dive site, and I've been in the water with them for nearly 13 years. Some date back almost 15 years. Grandma is one of them, with a light coloration, a little bit of a blemish in her eye, and a little dark spot in her mouth. She's one of the biggest girl on the dive site, and she has that gentle matter and the light gray, like the hair of a grandmother. Or Hook, who is named after the little shape, the little hook shape at the bottom of her dorsal fin. Instead of going straight, she's swimming around with a little hook on the bottom. Or Stumpy, one of my biggest girls, at 8 foot 10 inches. She's been here for 15 years, and she has a little piece of her tail missing. That's the reason why we call her Stumpy. And then there's a Scrunchy, who showed up with a hole in his head where I could see all the way to his skull, probably caused by the gaff of a fisherman trying to haul him back on boat. But he escaped and he came on the dive and he's been there since. We're counting now 10 years. And then there's Foggy Eye with a little blind eye and her standoffish attitude. In the beginning, she didn't really like to come in and to interact nor to be pet. Until one day I stuck my arm in, all the way in, into her throat, and I removed a really, really bad hook that had a wire coming out from her mouth. And then she changed. She became one of the most approachable sharks. And she became one of those that would come up to me and just lean into me from behind, from the side. Almost just has to say, hey, hello. And her behavior changed from that day on. I am very attached to my sharks. I love my sharks and I worry very much about them. Fortunately, I find that shark tourism has improved the likelihood to survive, has increased their value, especially here in the Bahamas, and has helped educate thousands of people coming in contact with them. Sure, during the feeding dives, when they have to sit still and looking at the sharks, but also during the regular dives, when they come and swim with the same sharks and they realize that even if they've been fed, even if they've been in proximity of people at a certain time of the day, at a certain feeding place, they're just that. They're sharks. They're animals swimming in their own environment. They're there like the rest of the fish. And they have only very simple goals in life. They want to survive, they want to eat, they want to reproduce, and they don't want to be hurt. They're actually trying to survive in a world that is becoming tighter and more difficult to them to be in. Shark tourism is a huge income in the Bahamas. And after I heard that there was some demand coming from the outside to come and fish our healthy shark population and our very varied shark population, I actually started a petition, which then was picked up by the Bahamas National Trust and the Pew Organization. And in 2011, we obtained the full protection of all the sharks in the entire Bahamian waters. We can't even land a dead shark. There are no loopholes in our legislations. So sharks are completely protected within our water. But as I love them and spend so much time with them, I want to help them the same way I would help my pup or any animal actually if I'm stranded on the side of the road, and I want them to actually feel good. And this is where the hook removal comes in. This is when I started to remove hooks. I start doing that because I see how much they suffer. I'm infected and swollen their jaws become, and how much harder it is for them to feed. Sometimes they go weeks without being able to feed. I remove each hook to help that particular shark. There's a shark with a hook, I will go in and remove it. I do not expect to help all the shark in the world, but my work, my desire to remove these hooks has inspired others to want to help sharks. And they've reached out to me asking me, hey, how can I help sharks? It doesn't have to be through hook removal. It can be through different actions in our lives. People have turned around and actually realized that sharks are creatures with feelings and sensations, not swimming nerve-ending jaws ready to snap, as someone defined them to me. Someone the other day even told me that sharks think with their mouths, not with their brain. For each hook that I remove, someone out there learns that there is a different way to look at sharks. There is a different way to put ourselves in a relationship with the ocean and its habitats. There is a truth that is in need to be shared to a wider audience. As I remove one hook, I make a difference for that one shark. I don't want to hear that the hook will rust anyway. That is simple cruelty. We will never leave any other animal with a shark, with a hook in their mouth and saying, oh, it will take a natural process. But as I remove hooks, more sharks appear with more hooks for me to remove. And as I remove one hook, I create ambassadors who now want to help sharks and actually want to know more. These sharks are my sharks. Although they're wild animals in the ocean, you will always hear me talking about them as my sharks. They're my pack. But they're also the ambassadors for many other sharks out there. The sharks that maybe are not protected, that swim in treacherous water. They're at risk of being fished, finned, and killed for many different reasons, including hatred. They're the voice of those voiceless sharks. And I hope that the actions that I conduct with them help inspire other people want to protect not only these sharks, but all the sharks. The thing is, people ask me, do sharks love you? I don't know. I love them. They might not love me back the way the human interpretation of love puts on them. We put expectations on these animals to behave according to our standards, according to our interpretation. But at the end of the day, I think that sharks know me. I know them, and they know that I want to care for them. And they have accepted that, and they have accepted me in doing that for them. I think the most heartbreaking part of being so attached to them is that I never know what happens to them if I don't see them for one day or for several days. No matter how many hours I spend in the water with them, I am not an ocean creature. I still need all my gear to be down there, and my hours and hours in the water with them will be nothing compared to a lifetime. Madai is one of them. Madai was one of my males that liked to come into my lap and had started to interact, but he had something lodged in his throat, something that protruded from below. And one day he started to bleed from his gills. And there was really nothing I can do but watch him till 2, 3 days later, he never showed up. Or Foggy Eye. Foggy Eye was my favorite. I'm now counting 2 years since I last saw her. I think she had a little tumor. It started like a little broccoli growth on the bottom of her dorsal fin, and then by the time she lost so much weight, it had grown all up her dorsal fin. And she became so thin and so delicate. And then one day, about 2 years ago, she never came back. So my relationship with them is a unique one. It's a one of love. It's a one of hope. It's a lot of worry. It's one of never closure because, well, I actually never know their story till the end. And so is a relationship that leaves a piece of my soul empty. Every time one goes, it never comes back. So my presentation is done. I hope you have some questions. If you have questions, please type it on the side. I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Cristina, can you hear me? No?
I still can't hear you, April, but I can see you. And I'm on chat on stage. I see Scott wrote, woo-wee. Okay. So I don't see any questions coming in. We have 5 minutes, or a little bit more, April. How concerned are you about harvesting for squalene? Oh, that's a very good question, Scott. Well, I'm very concerned because squalene has been used in vaccines way before the COVID vaccine became experimental. So it now has come to light. So in a certain way, perhaps it is, I don't want to say a good thing, but squalene was used in vaccines way before COVID. And maybe COVID, it might bring a screaming voice to what is done. There are natural squalene that comes from plants that could be used rather than sharks. So Brooke asks, great presentation. Do you always wear the chainmail or only at certain times? Look like your hoses are armored also. Very good question. So I wear the chain suit specifically when I'm interacting with the food and removing the hooks. But like the pictures you saw with the divers, or if I'm not interacting with them, I go down without chainmail. And I do that with most of the species of sharks here in the Bahamas, tigers, bulls, great hammerheads, lemons. It's just because I have that physical interaction with the sharks and also this bad habit of shoving my hand down their throat. The hoses are armored for a simple fact that if a shark accidentally grazes a hose, it will puncture it and will end up the dive. So with the armor, it prevents having to interrupt the dive just because I have a hose leaking. So it's just like a precautions, is a little helmet that I put on before I go on a bike. But they really don't bite them. It's just so that we don't have to interrupt the dive if one of the hoses is punctured. And the change suit is really beautiful. I call it my barrier that drops the barrier between me and the sharks. I'd also call it the beekeeper suit. is because I'm such doing a close interaction with them. I feel that it's my duty to make sure that we are all safe. I am safe, the sharks are safe, the people are safe, so that if there's nothing happening, nobody is going to be blamed, and that is belongs to the industry, to the people, and to the sharks. So it prevents damages to anyone and makes the obviously shark tourism continue in the correct way. But if you look at the pictures where the people are watching, they're not even a meter from someone feeding, they don't wear protection. Thank you, Jason. I just saw your comment now. Is there any more questions? Now, the spectating divers are replaceable. Um, no, they are not. Absolutely not. Actually, quite a lot of the guests that come diving with me also come back for multiple experiences, just because they're capable of being introduced to each shark personally. They also develop a like and the preference is like, oh, I remember grandma. And so I receive messages of people asking me, how is a Stumpy doing? How is Scrunchy? And they start, and I think it is very important for people to start identify with the different individuals. Scott asked me, how long does it take for a new shark to come into you? Very good question. It depends on the shark. Some sharks are very, I would say, dominant, and some sharks are less dominant. Having three dogs, I don't want to compare sharks to any other animals, but in a certain way it relates. You have the dog that is a little bit more the leader of the pack and the one that is less. So some sharks may take just a few dives. Some sharks may take months to actually warm up to the concept coming in. So they come in, they feel the smell of the fish, they notice that all the other sharks are circling around, but obviously the situation is not something they're very familiar with, and so they'll evaluate depending on their desire to come in. I have two girls that actually perfect example with that. I had Trek and Vulcan. So Vulcan was named from her fin tip is really pointy, and she reminded me of the Vulcan, the jet fighter of the British Air Force. And so I named her Vulcan, but everybody thought I named her Vulcan after live long and prosper. So the shark that she showed up with actually took the name of Trek, and they both showed up at about 4 feet long, it's about over a meter, and more or less with the same behavior. But fast forward 4 years later, Trek is very much one of the sharks that comes in, follows me on all the dive, even the ones where I don't have food, or she'll be like with me for the entire dive, where Vulcan has remained a little bit, let's say, shy. So comes in only when really there's maybe the dive going on, but for the rest of the time tries to keep her distance so she's not as interactive. And they both came in at the same time, and they're more or less the same size. So that showed it was really good example of how sharks are different in their personalities and learning capabilities. So there's a noticeable hierarchy. Yes, there is a fairly noticeable hierarchy. In the group, primarily have females. The males tend to live within the reef, like sometimes at the visual distance, but don't come into the interactive dive. They tend to be more spread into the rest of the reef. And within the females, it seems that the older ones, which tend also to be the bigger ones, so it could be the two factors, the old and the size, have a priority over the younger ones. I've seen them discipline the younger ones as well. If the shark is swimming and the younger one is in the way, I've seen the sharks give it like a jaw snap, like just kind of like get out of the way. And just having the small one just like kind of scuttle off a little bit faster out of her swimming pattern. So they definitely have a Perfect. So April said, if you have more questions, I actually have a session open. I will move to the sessions and you guys can find me there. It's called Q&A for Shark World.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. I know you can't hear me, Cristina. Technical difficulty again, but thank you. Thank you.
Thank you
Everyone
so much,
else,
April.
yeah. Thank you. So we're going to wrap it up. Yep. Thank you. Bye-bye.